Let's do it. Well, Mark, I really appreciate having you here on the Social Entrepreneurship and Innovation podcast. For folks who are unfamiliar, would you mind introducing yourself and sharing with us a little bit as to what it is that you do?
Yeah, my name is Mark Horoszowski. I'm the CEO and co-founder of MovingWorlds. We are a organization with sites around the world with a focus on helping support and scaling a social enterprise movement. And our real focus in there is helping educate, empower, and build connections for the actual people like doing the work, right? So these are individuals within corporations trying to make their companies more sustainable. These are people within nonprofits who are trying to build their skills and look for market-based solutions. These are people within social enterprises themselves that are trying to upskill and access talent and support to overcome challenges. And then it's also for network partners, people that are trying to fund and support and sponsor social enterprises, realizing that it's going to take more than capital to do that. We got to invest in the human capital, and that's really where MovingWorlds comes in to connect these different players together across a variety of different programs to help make sure that we're building up the human capital for people working to bring social enterprise solutions more mainstream.
Excellent. And from what I gathered, are y'all approaching a decade at MovingWorlds? Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
What
The
is
end of
that
this year will be a
like
decade.
to hit about
Yeah,
10 years?
man. I don't know. It's something, right?
Am I the first one to have reminded you of that's coming up?
It's funny. It's like we've talked about that. Like, hey, we've been around for almost a decade, right? Like that's come up
It's a
in
significant thing.
pitches and partnerships. But honestly speaking, it's not something I've set back to reflect on, right? And I don't like where this kind of makes me think now is right. Like what we were a decade ago is not what we are today, right? There's been a lot of changes, and in fact, our latest initiative, is okay. It was baking for 2 years, right? But it's really like a less than half a year old, right? And so part of it still feels so new, right? And I think probably the reason that we're around a decade is because we did sunset our very first idea, because well, let's be honest, most first ideas don't work, right? So we learned a lot from it, but yeah. Anyway, it's funny to think organizationally, yeah, we've been going at it for a while, but and the mission has actually stayed relatively front and center during those times. But certainly how we've gotten there, we're so different than where we started.
Well, I'm always so interested with folks like y'all who are in the center point of this whole kind of ecosystem, working cross-sector, nonprofit, corporate partnerships, a social enterprise, and as well, even, you help serve professionals who are looking to get into this type of community too. So I'm interested to know, I guess, what sort of maybe lessons or understanding do you feel like you have about this whole ecosystem of social change as it is professionally, or as well, how people are spending their time here. Like what do you feel like you understand now that you didn't 10 years
Oh,
ago?
interesting. I think it's just the importance of a single person, right? Because even in the way that you're framing that question of take any person, right? Grab them off the street, right? And that person, regardless of their political beliefs, regardless of what they're doing for work on a day-to-day, regardless of their family situation, they probably believe and want to make things better for themselves and those around them, right? Now they might have very different beliefs about how they go, but that one person matters a ton. And I think it's easy for social entrepreneurs, and I know I'm this way, to think systems, all these big things. Imagine all these big changes, right? But I think just drilling down into one person and say what is it like for one person to create more impact in their career, right? And I think when we started doing that, we really learned, right? There are single individuals that are saying, I don't think I can make an impact where I am in my company. And I'm playing the tape for it, and I don't see where I can do that. I need to make a move, right? And I believe that the best way I can make an impact is using social entrepreneurial principles, right?
Mm.
Doesn't mean I have to be a social entrepreneur, but to use these principles of creating change with the market. Now, other people, maybe they're in a company and they do see a way to create a change, right? They're in Amazon right now and they see these massive investments in sustainability and
Mm.
equity initiatives, right? And they're like, I can move that, right? And so 6 months ago, they were thinking about leaving that company, but now they're like, no, I'm going to stay. I'm going to see if I can change it, right? And then you have other people within social enterprises, like right now, who are well, many social enterprises during COVID, right, are struggling a ton, right? And they're saying, if I can make this social enterprise work, right, if I can get us to revenue, if I can get us to capital, whatever it might be, um, I can help us grow and make an impact. And so I think that's probably my biggest takeaway is like you go to this like very human, like individual level, and you
Mm.
get to know individuals, and you go, oh, like that's a problem I can solve. Like if someone feels like they can't make an impact in their career and they're going to leave their company and like try and figure out how to do that, they're thinking about education, they're thinking about a master's degree, they're thinking about spending and capitalizing a business. Like they are spending money to solve that problem. If I can solve that problem better than anybody else, there's a market there, there's a market in that one person, and if there's one, then there's more, right? And so I think that's probably the biggest piece, right, is just like really humanizing the people that you're trying to serve and realizing like what they're trying to go through. And you're like, and then you see their problems, right? And then when you know their problems, right, then you can prototype solutions and you figure out what works.
Mm. And so what is maybe as you said, Moving Worlds looks much different today than it did when you started. What's been something that you feel like y'all have adapted or adjusted in response to that, like whether
Yeah,
consciously or unconsciously?
yeah, great question. So when we started, we were a marketplace where social enterprises around the world could request immersive skills-based volunteers, right?
Mm.
They could essentially say, hey, I need someone for a week to train my team, right, on the latest technology or sales, or I need someone to help lead my marketing for 3 months because we ended up not being able to raise money. We don't have any cash flow. We can't hire. We can't do anything else. We feel stuck. But if we got this, then we could get customers, and then maybe we could go either grow on revenue or maybe make it to an investment round. So that's where we started. And of course, social enterprises don't have free cash flow, right? So there's no market there.
Mm.
And where we actually found market was professionals who were saying like, hey, I want a really cool experience. I don't know who all these different social enterprises are, but I will pay Moving Worlds a little bit of money, and with that money, they will find me a project overseas where I can live for free in exchange for my
Mm.
skills. So that's where we started. We tested a lot of different price points, um, and what we ultimately learned is like people don't have budgets to volunteer, right? Like nobody has that, and there is like an asterisk to this, which is where we thought there was a really big market. Which there are some people that pay thousands of dollars to volunteer, but they're not paying to volunteer, right? They're going on a vacation that they feel good about, and they're probably going with their kids or a
Right.
student group that it's like summer camp, but with this whole social good feeling, right?
Mm.
And we thought we could upset that market because we think that market is well, nobody measures long-term impact on the communities, right? So it's not designed to actually help. So we thought we could upset that. It didn't work. We thought we could support social enterprises. As these professionals were going, what we learned is some are altruistic, but that really wasn't why they were doing it. Right? They were
Mm.
doing it because they want exposure to social enterprise so they could grow. They were trying to learn more about sustainability chains so they could come back and make their company more sustainable. Um, or third, they were like, they were they were they were going to make some type of big change in their life, and they were just experimenting on a lot of different sectors, decided what
Mm.
to do. So once we understood that, and we understood that people were looking at not help me find a project to volunteer my skills, but rather help me figure out how to make my career a big and positive and long-lasting social influence on the world, then we were able to say, okay, well, how do we solve that problem?
Mm.
And here's where we got lucky is at the same time that this was happening, because we had built this big skills-based platform, we had started to develop contracts with corporations who brought us in to help them scale up social impact programs within their own companies by engaging employees. And so we had this free cash flow. And we also use that to invest in doing things like building up leadership development
Mm.
curriculum. We hired an educator. And so we had these assets. And then we started to experiment to say, wow, are these like leadership development and educational assets and social innovation assets? Would they add value to these people that were looking to like volunteer their skills, right? And it turns out they did. So we created a program around that called the MovingWorlds Institute, right? And so this has been around now for I guess over 4 years. I was just like looking down the calendar. Like this has been around now for over 4 years, um, and that program like helps professionals transition and grow impact in their careers, right? And it's the way it does that is it provides education, it provides coaching, it provides mentorship, but most importantly, I think it stretches people to go get experience in some type of stretch social impact project. It might be their own, it might be one through the Moving Worlds network, but it stretches them, right? So I think it was like us getting so close to the humans, right? The individuals where we
Mm.
learned that that's what they were going for, right? And so I think, that's one example. Like that was like night and day different for us to ship something like that. And then once we shipped something and had this like global community of practice, then some of our corporate partners came back and were like, hey, you're educating people in this really unique, like human-centered way, right? Like online courses are a dime a dozen. Like there's a lot of those,
Mhm.
but you all are doing something different, right? You're scaling not through online courses, but through interactions with other peers that are grappling with these same challenges and topics, right? So what
Mm.
I mean by that is there's a lot of ways to learn about human-centered design, and there's a lot of great case studies out there. What we do is we tell people like, go create your own case study, right? Like get involved in a social impact project, use these principles, and then when you struggle, come back and talk about that with other peers also using human-centered design to create social good, right?
Mm.
And then just to keep us, keep the guardrails up, we've got an educator on those calls, helping make sure that we're pulling on the right framework. So once we had that built out, then some of our corporate partners were like, oh, hey, you've got all these assets now. Can you come help us build these, right? And again, that was not something that was like you can go back to our first business plan, like a scalable interaction-based learning, like through communities of practice, was nowhere in our first business plan, right? But it's what the market wanted, what the market needed, and we were fortunate to be able to make the right hires and build the right connections to build out those capabilities.
Hmm. So I'm curious then with y'all's latest program, the S-Grid program, we're focusing on mostly social enterprises kind of falling in the middle there of the folks that you serve.
Yeah.
What's then had you draw such attention to the social enterprise community right now?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So when we first started, it was like help empower social enterprises,
Mm.
right? It's so hard to raise money as a social enterprise. It's so hard to find talent, right? It's so hard to find like bigger corporate or industry based or governmental or foundation partnerships. Like these are all such real challenges. And that's always been front and center. Like how do we do that? And we were a little more reactionary with these business opportunities with like the institute, and which all stemmed from what we had originally developed for the corporates, right? And then we're like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
let's take this amazing stuff and like open source it to this community of ours that's asking for this kind of thing. But we're like, we have to do more to support the social enterprises. And this is where the network effect like really started to come into play for us, right? Is on one side we had corporations saying, hey, like you are helping us think differently about social impact and social enterprise, right? And give you examples here, right? Microsoft is a corporate partner of ours. They've been that for over 5 years. The initiative that we co-designed with them is called My Skills for Africa. In that, they find startups, they find social enterprises, and they help them upskill their technology
Mm.
so that these startups can do things like get remote power into disconnected communities, get Wi-Fi like Mwingu networks into remote communities, figure out how to use mobile technologies to get information into the hands of farmers, or scale up mobile banking solutions. And what we heard time and time again, and Microsoft's just one example of this, right? Another one is Kering, which is the mother brand for 15 luxury brands, including Gucci, right? It's like you have people working in sustainability in these companies saying, we want to do more with social enterprises, right? But they can't fulfill the demand and supply that we need, right? And
Mm,
so there's this massive gap where companies are saying, we would do more if you could deliver things to us on time and at certain standards on a consistency basis.
mm,
And so we're like, oh, well, we know how to help solve that problem because our expertise are doing that all the time. Like the people in our MovingWorlds Institute professional programs, in our corporate programs, they're going and helping upskill social enterprises to do that very thing. So we really kind of saw this growing and said, hey, look, there's a way for us to really accelerate our mission here by taking this approach that we've developed to helping people develop professional skills, and now make that available to social enterprises, right? And so that's the SGRID program, the Sustainable Growth of Revenues for International Development. It's for social enterprises that have revenue, that have a product or program or service, and they're stuck in this, like, maybe you've heard the terms like the startup valley of death or the pioneer gap, right?
mm,
They're stuck in this place where, like, they've got some traction, but like, how do they get to that next step? And they're all busy trying to raise money, and all people investing are like, well, I'm not investing until you get me sales. And like, well, I can't get sales until I have help to go get sales. So
mm,
we are that help, right? And that help is connections. That help is pro bono expertise for that specific purpose. And it's also an assessment coaching from our team to help social enterprises grow in that area so that they go out, build these partnerships, get revenue coming in, be able to hire up, and then grow on revenue, right? Or if they choose to look towards impact investors or other means, right? Those opportunities are there too. But yeah, S-Grid is kind of cool. Then, like, it's like the third leg of the stool for us, right? It's like we're educating companies on how to look to the social enterprise sector. We're helping people build their skills to work in social enterprises, and then we're helping social entrepreneurs themselves build the revenue channels to actually be able to grow and hire up and connect nicely with these other players.
mm. And so I'm interested do you feel like the social enterprises that are in this valley, like are they well aware of what their problem is, perhaps
Mm.
like needing that greater scalability of their operations, what it might be to serve like a large corporate partner, or what's the, like, are they problem aware, or
Sure,
like
yeah,
what might
yeah.
be going on?
Man, it's such a good question. What I do is I put them into three different camps, right? So I would say there's one camp that intellectually knows, right? They're like, yep, we got to grow sales, right? Um, but then there's like no there's no proof of that if you actually looked at, right? So if you looked at the organization, you would see anything but that. You would see marketing campaigns, you'd see them working on product, right? Give you an example. Earlier today, I was talking to an ed tech social enterprise. They've got content, they've got engineers working on like AI, right? And their biggest challenge is revenue, right? And they have 75% of their team building out their future technology and their content, right? And it's because they're a technology content distributing company, right? Um, but today, my opinion, right, that's not where 75% of their resources and assets should be developed. So
Mm,
they know it. They know it, right? So intellectually, they're in group one. They know that they need to grow, but operationally, they're doing the wrong thing, right? The second one, and I'll call these the visionaries, right? These are the people that just like don't know or don't believe, right? They're just like, no, I'm just gonna raise a lot of money and then everything works out, right? And so they're just like, I don't need to prove it. Like, my idea is so good, I don't need to prove it. I need to go raise money and then like everything works. That's a different problem set, right? And you speak to that group differently, right? And then there's the third, which is like, hey, we know it and we're working on it, right? These are the people, they are like in the trenches. They are like, they're trying to get in the doors. They're trying to make sales, right? Um, but they haven't done it before,
mm,
or they don't have the right skills on the team, and so they're selling the wrong thing to the wrong person at the wrong company, right? Um, Give you an example, right? There's a really cool like waste collection social enterprise in our network, right? Um, get an email from them 4 weeks ago, like, hey, can you introduce me to your partners at GSK and at Gucci, right? We've got recycled plastic. we know they're making stuff out of recycled plastic. We want to sell to them. Like, and they are using their connections. They're sending emails. They're doing all these things, and they're getting no sales, not because they're wrong, right? But they're not educated enough in the industry to know that the GSKs and the Pumas and the Guccis aren't the ones buying that plastic, right? Their manufacturers aren't even the ones buying that raw plastic. You got to go farther down that value chain to find these new innovative groups that are taking all types of mess wasted plastic,
Mm.
putting that into threads, selling that threads to manufacturers who are then partnering with brands to turn that into product, right? And so they're in the trenches, they're doing the work, but they're focused on the wrong buyer, right? Like they're just swinging for a grand slam every time, and like they just need to be out there like trying to lay down bunts for now, right? So I think those are the three groups that we see, right? And it's a little easier to work with group number one and group number three because they at least kind of know it. But there's still hope for group number two. So
I would hope so. I'd really hope so. But I'm wondering then, like, as all these social enterprises and the founders and teams are at different spaces, um, what do you find are maybe common misconceptions or maybe pieces of poor advice that perhaps they've received previously that's kind of had them
mm,
at that deadlock position that's not allowing them to scale and see the impact that they'd like to?
yeah. Um, I think every entrepreneur knows this. I think every just person knows this, right? Is in order to grow a business and hire people and produce value, right? And that business, that can be a social enterprise, that can be a nonprofit, like you need capital.
Mm,
I think everybody understands that. Um, I think the biggest misconception is where is the most capital, right?
mm,
Because if you talk to most social enterprises, what they're trying to do is they're trying to raise money for their idea, right? They're always going after, and they're spending so much time. They're pitching for award. And look, guilty, man. I was there. I did that, right? And and you learn, and then and in the last 20 years, there have been about $450 billion worth of impact investment capital assets deployed, right? It's a non-trivial amount of money, for sure.
mm.
That's actually a lot of money. Um, but every year, right, there is over $12 trillion, right? So every year, there's a number 20 times greater than like essentially all impact investing assets ever deployed that's just spent on business to business transactions, right?
Mm,
One of our partners, SAP, has a platform called Ariba. It's like, it's PayPal for business to business, right? It's like procurement, right? Just that platform alone every year transacts $3 trillion,
mm.
right? Um, and so like, so people are like, oh, impact investment, like that's where capital is. And I think that's the biggest misconception because that is not the most capital.
Mm,
Uh, um, a lot of nonprofits are like, hey, you know where the biggest money is? USAID and government spending on global development. Um, Governments last year deployed about $150 billion on governmental aid. A massive amount of money, for sure, right? It's almost the same as how much was invested by venture capitalists, right? Right.
mm.
Um, but even that pales in comparison to the amount of money that just businesses are transacting with each other, right? And so if you can help, and I'm not saying like that $12 trillion going business to business, like that's not going to become nonprofit philanthropy, right?
Right.
Um, but what it can do is it could be spent in a way where we then don't need philanthropy to try and clean up the mess of what that $12 trillion is doing, right?
Right.
Because that $12 trillion is digging holes in grounds, it's throwing plastic in oceans, right? And so if that can be used more responsibly, um, right, then it can have a massive impact on the world. And a lot of companies actually are trying to do more to hit sustainability and
Hmm.
equity and transparency and justice targets, right? And so that's the big misconception is like, you can chase impact investment money all day, or you can go find you can find market-based partnerships who have a problem that you can solve. And that's going to do a lot more for your business than any amount of impact investing capital.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely not the first time I've heard that from a guest here, is that there are some allures of that impact capital, and what it can do from the sense of what kind of equity you have to give up and
Yeah,
control of the enterprise.
sure.
It's something well worth understanding if you, as a social enterprise, are really well fit for seeking capital in that
Yeah,
way. So it's
yeah,
it's something certainly needing to be well thought out. But
yeah,
so we're talking about this exceptional opportunity that might exist for social enterprises to be able to access capital, and it's really through growing the revenue, which is
yeah,
makes a lot of sense. But for folks listening in, and I know many of Moving Worlds' resources are a great place to go. But for the sake
sure.
of our conversation, if they want to start opening their minds more so to accessing some of these cross-sector partnerships, these corporate
Mm,
partnerships, where do you think they begin?
yeah. Um, yeah, so yeah, the shameless plug, right? It's like, hey, we've got some resources on Moving Worlds, but like, no, ignore me. Like, honestly, like get out of the building and just go talk to people that you think like might benefit from your value chain, right?
Mm,
And so um, like maybe I can use coffee here as an example, right? Um, I think loosely most people know that like coffee grows, right? It grows on trees, it gets picked, there's some level of like processing and harvesting, it gets distributed, and then it ends up and it gets processed, right? And then people drink it, right? So like if you operate in that value chain, right? A lot of people are like, okay, I'm gonna go sell better coffee to consumers, right?
mm,
Um, but the when I say like get out of the building, like don't just go to consumers, right? Say, hey, I have a hypothesis, which is like consumers are maybe the best place and the fastest way that I can grow my revenues, but create other ones too, right? Which is to say, I think grocery stores are places where I could actually make a lot of sales too, or I actually think that I could help in like the packaging part of this value chain. Um, and some of those ideas, like the packaging, might be stupid or they might be relevant. I don't know, right? The point is, your product, program, or service, like map the value chain, find different types of businesses along it, and then just go talk to them, right?
mm,
And just be like, what what problems do you have? Like, where are you spending money and you're still frustrated? Um, where are you investing resources this next year, right? What's a problem that you wish someone would come and solve for you, right? What type of solution would you buy like right now, right? And talk and start to categorize these things and look for themes, right? And I think what in that way what social entrepreneurs can then do is to say, okay, wow, I thought I should be selling, right? Like Moving Worlds, right? Like when we started, we're like, hey, we're gonna go after these people that are spending thousands of dollars to go pay and like ride enslaved elephants and like I yeah, maybe I'm being judgmental there, but like we're gonna go talk to them and like tell them to go do something else, and then it didn't work, right?
mm,
And so then we went and found like another customer segment, and then another customer segment, and another customer segment until we found a real problem that we could actually solve better than anybody else. So I think from experience, right? I think that's also like if you've read the Lean Startup or like Steve Blank's customer development stuff. Um, there's a great book on this topic called the Focus Framework, which is like how to do lean startup. It, all these things, design thinking, human centered
mm.
design, they all say like go talk to humans, figure out their problems, and solve it better than anybody else at a better price point, and then you can generate revenue. And so I think that's my biggest thing is like just get out of the building, um, go talk to these different types of business segments along a value chain. Do that with a learning mindset. Start running experiments, and you'll find like you will start to solve problems for people. And as soon as that happens, then like they start coming to you, and you're like
Mm.
all of a sudden you're like, oh, like I don't I don't know what happened, but now I'm actually selling too much and I need to get better at delivery, right? And
Mm.
that's like a magical moment for a social entrepreneur.
It's definitely a much better problem to be dealing with than
That's right.
the lack of sales. But yeah,
Right.
I mean it's so simple, but obviously it, easier said than done. It can take a
For
bit of
sure.
grit for sure, but it's just wild how much information and how many assumptions get checked in good conversation with who might
Oh my
be,
gosh.
in your market.
Yep.
And especially or acutely now, as we're in the world of Zoom calls during the pandemic world, maybe creating that sort of serendipity, as a lot of people aren't, doing the same sort of kind of boots on the ground, going to events and that kind of
Yeah.
networking and connecting, that there's a little bit more kind of impetus that's required, a little bit more of a push that maybe
Sure.
you need for yourself to reach out. But folks are usually generous, and open for a conversation. So,
They are, right? And if they've got a problem to solve, like,
mm,
man, right? And they get the message, right? Like one of the earliest tests, right? I was advising a kind of like a human like um, uh, resource, like AI driven startup on this, right? Like there's a lot of steps between now and my first sale, right? And so
mm,
so how can you design a first experiment? And so they had segmented their market, and we said, like, what's the first test that you can run to figure out if people need help with screening applicants at scale, right? um, and and there's like, okay, well, there's different people within the enterprise. There's those that care about diversity and inclusion, there's recruiting, there's hiring managers, and then so you say, okay, like, well, what's the value prop to each of those groups? Like
mm,
you have a business in mind. You know that the business has a problem, but now you have these people within it, and they have different problems, right? And so, because you're actually like, you might actually threaten that one person's job because you've got AI there, right? So
mm,
you're going to make finance happy, you're going to scare recruiting, right? And then IT is going to block you because they're worried about the data, right? So,
mm,
who cares about what, right? And so the easiest way to do that is like with a blind email test, right? You throw a problem front and center in the subject line or like the very first paragraph, right? Like, hey, I'm trying to talk to recruiters who are trying to keep up with demand. I'm wondering if you have this problem, and if so, I'd love to talk to you, see how you're solving it. I can share some insights of what other people are doing across the industry, right?
mm,
And you send 20 emails to the recruiters, 20 to IT, 20 to 20 to the hiring managers, um, and you see your response, right? And if nobody in IT responds and the hiring managers don't respond, but you get a 20% respond rate from recruiters, forget the other segments. That's your land, right? So then you go in there, right, and you focus on that group. And so I think like that, like some of these first experiments can actually be so easy.
mm.
And digitally right now, everybody's living this anyway. So it's almost easier to run these now,
Mm,
right? It's like people are on LinkedIn, they're on their email more. So like design experiment, try it, get after them, get in front. And if you lead with a problem and people start being like, yeah, that's a problem that I have, like that's gold, right? That's better than any impact investment capital because it actually shows like, here's a market problem, right? And then you solve that, and then the rest will come.
mm. And so, maybe speaking specifically to the SCRIB program, I know that's very tactical, but maybe the overarching framework of the experiments themselves, or is this the type of material that you and your team are helping folks run through, or like what does it look like a bit like modularly for a social
Yeah.
enterprise?
Yeah, great question. So there's let me answer this in two parts. One is for everything that for every module that we do, it will go through a pretty simple process, which is like really light learning, right? Like as an example, what I just said about emails, like that this is value proposition testing, right?
Hmm.
Like I think most entrepreneurs get that in like a couple minutes. Like they don't need a big fancy video. It's like, boom, that's all you need. They just need to go do it. And then what's going to happen is they're going to write the email. They're going to be like, oh, wait, is this email good? Am I writing the right thing? Or I send it? So they just want to talk to a real human, right? They want to talk to someone who's done it, or they want to talk to peers, right? So that's what we do, right? Is we like really light learning, and then let's actually connect you either with our team or peers to then like help you maybe refine that email, get a little bit more crisp of an experiment. And then like, if you really need more help, if you're like, man, this is so far beyond the realm of the expertise of our team, could you actually help give me someone who could run this experiment for us or help us run this experiment, right? Then we have our experteering network, the professionals that
Mm,
want to volunteer, either coming from companies or from our institute to help. So for every learning module, it's like really light learning, peer-based support to go do the thing, like with some templates to make it easy, and then this like deeper level support if needed. Now, then the things that we kind of teach, if you will, like the modules, right? One is just value chain mapping, right? Like
Mm.
we are your accountability buddy. We're your partner in mapping a value chain and saying like, here are all the different stages of the value chain. And you know this, like we know you know it. We're the personal trainer. It's like you know how to work out, but we're the personal trainer actually holding you to it, like doing the things to map the value chain and then be a thought partner and saying where are there opportunities in it. From there, it's around value proposition design. So if these are the different segments that I have, what is the value proposition for each of these segments, right? And it changes, right? If let's say you grow a fair trade coffee and roast it, how you sell to a consumer is different than a grocery store is different to like
Mm.
a middleman who's packaging and distributing, right? So we're going to help you think about the value propositions and then the tests you could run to do that. From there, you're going to get into like the actual sales processes, right? So now that you've kind of narrowed in on a specific segment, how do you actually build up the sales muscle to get through these steps, right? So what system are you using to track it, right? Are you using some type of CRM? Are you using Sheets? Doesn't actually matter. You can use whatever you want. We're just going to help you think about doing that in a way that works for your organization. Are you doing it? Are you running experiments on it? And then you're using the data from it to make more informed decisions, right? And we can even be thought partners in there. And again, if you need more help with like, I really need the CRM set up, I don't know how to do it, like we've got expertise for you, right? We'll help connect you to the right pro bono consultant to work on that with you. And then then you start to get into actual like pricing and contracting, right? So like, oh my gosh, I got this big pitch next week. I got to think of a pricing strategy for this. I've never done this before. What do I do? Again, you've got peers to support you. You've got our network to support you. And then kind of cutting across all of those is just access to like, we're going to be bringing different people from the corporate sector in to talk and be like, hey, look, if you want to get involved in the PepsiCo supply chain, like this is what our supply chain looks like. Don't contact us at headquarters. Like it's going to be such a waste of time. But here's how you find people within your country, right, who plug into our value chain, right? And this is what they care about. So,
Mm.
so yeah, those are the layers, and then just like always trying to be relevant, right? Bring in experts in, bring in industry people in, trying to help bridge connections, and trying to make some introductions as well, right? Help see if we can shortcut some steps for our members to get in front of the right potential buyers.
Excellent. And so, but before we wrap up with some rapid fire questions, Mark,
Sure.
where's the best place for folks to go to learn more about the S-Grid program and maybe see if they're a good fit?
Yeah, perfect. So movingworlds.org will get you there. If you want to land directly on the S-Grid, it's movingworlds.org/SGrid. That's just SGRID. And you can learn more there. You can also email me. I'm just mark@movingworlds.org.
Perfect. All right. Well, first question to kick us off, Mark. What's a favorite book that you always come back to, or something that you've maybe recommended or read recently in the space of social impact or social change?
Yeah, I've been on such like a behavioral like social science
Mm.
kick. The one that really launched me into that is Poor Economics.
Mm.
Esther Duflo and I'm forgetting the co-author's first name, last name's Banerjee. This is an early 2000, just like kind of mind-blowing, mind-opening book of a lot of things that you think will work aren't, right, and why. And it's
Mm.
because like at the end of the day, humans are complicated. We don't fully understand how we're going to react in different situations. So just like really understanding like how irrational humans often are
Mm.
from an economic perspective, but we're also like, it's actually quite predictable from like a human like and connection and belonging perspective, right? So yeah, I love that book for
Excellent.
economics.
Okay. And what's maybe a morning routine or daily habit that you feel like you have to stick to?
Uh, I've got to move my body. So some type of workout. I've got a few different ones that I'll lean on. Either doing a run, doing some yoga, getting on a row machine. But just yeah, getting the heart rate up, thinking about what my biggest obstacles are for the day and how I can show up in like a good healthy way to get through those. So yeah, pseudo workout, pseudo mindfulness. But I don't show up as the best person if I don't do that.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you there. And what's maybe one thing that you, as an impact-driven entrepreneur, as the CEO of an organization, what's something that you're focusing on evolving right now as a skill as a leader or founder?
Yeah, there's a great book called Multipliers, and it talks about like what makes like really effective managers.
Mm,
And there are multipliers, so there are people that like multiply the efforts of their team, and then there are detractors, right? There are people who like think they're helping, they actually like make the people that they work with less effective.
mm,
And I think as a founder who helped launch and run some of our first programs, I have like what I will call like our detractor tendencies according to this book, right? And so like as an example, like I can come up with program designs like really fast. Like that's what I've kind of built my career on, right? That's what Moving Worlds is built on. So I can help other team members like think about the program designs really, really clearly. But that's actually like a detracting tendency, right? Instead of building the skills of those individuals to like be even better program designers, if I'm rushing to a solution, then I'm actually detracting, right? Yeah, that's I think that the big thing that I'm working on is just like how can I be a multiplier, right? With
mm,
with all of my teammates, knowing that everyone's got a different strength that they bring to the table. But yeah, that is an awesome book, and it's helping me with that transition from like, hey, trying to stay afloat to like, okay, now we're growing like at a pretty good clip. How do we grow in a way that's really like generative for every team member as
mm.
well as for the organization?
Love that. And then lastly, what's maybe a parting piece of advice or an ask of aspiring social entrepreneurs or active purpose-driven business leaders?
Yeah, yeah, great question. I like in our institute program, which is one that helps professionals like think through transitions in their careers, right? Like the biggest thing, and where we spend the most time trying to like nudge people is to like just go do, right? Like,
Mm,
and there's so many different like inspirational quotes and books and things, right? And we're always thinking like, okay, so telling people just to go do something, like it doesn't like we all know we just need to go do something. Like if you want to go start a business, like just go start talking to like potential customers. uh, what we have found is being like one of the best indicators that people will go do something, right, is they write a goal down and they tell someone about it,
mm,
right? And so like right now, whoever's listening to this, right, like write something down, like write like what is one action that will help you create more impact in your career, take your social enterprise to the next step. Like take a second, write that down, think about it, get your pen, jot a note on your phone, type it on the screen wherever you're listening. And after you write that down, like before you sign off for the day, just send this to someone and say, hey, check in with me in a week to make sure I've done this. Like that first step towards action of just setting a goal and building in some peer accountability, we find time and time again is like the most indicative of people then taking like the next step and the next step and the next step, right? And I think especially now when like things are so challenging, like
mm.
the only like real expectation is to take a small step, right? Everything else is like too daunting and scary right now. So yeah, write something down, tell someone about it, take a next step.
Perfect. Excellent parting advice. We'll make sure everything linked up to Moving Worlds is at growensemble.com in the show notes. Thanks so much, Mark.